Testing, testing, one, two, three. That good? Okay, you taking notes today? I don't think so. Testing. Okay, that sounds good.
While you're off.
Yeah, I know, right?
Hey, this is for Matt.
Okay.
Were you traveling during that time?
By the time I felt bad, we were home. But we were in Greensboro Christmas Day through that Thursday. And the day that we got there, Pearson's sister came down with a fever. And then she had a fever the whole time we were there. So there was just no avoiding it.
Yeah.
And then we were in the same house as her. So I started to kind of feel off on Thursday. And then by Friday, I was like, whatever she had, I got. I never had a fever, but I was just very fatigued, had a bad cough, sore throat.
Sounds like flu, maybe COVID.
Yeah.
Potentially.
Hey there.
Today.
A new girl came to church today.
Okay, as you find your way to a seat, if you need one of these diagrams, just raise your hand. Probably have one, but if not, Jeff Belk or somebody can hand you one. Can be helpful to you. They'll be on the screen, but it might be helpful just to have in front of you to see. Right here. What's that? Oh, you got to buy them. Sorry. Yeah. $20 to Jeff Belt. Yeah. Oh, $3 today. 2 for $5. Again, if you didn't get one of these, might be helpful just to have it in front of you. I'm going to get us started. And Shelley, can you close those doors back there for us? And I want to thank Matt for what a wonderful job he did this morning. Psalm 1. You know, I've done Psalm 1 before. And I was like, that's way better than when I did it. And so it's a little discouraging, but encouraging in a way. And I just want to read the first 3 verses there. Blessed is the man who walks not in the counsel of the wicked, nor stands in the way of sinners, nor sits in the seat of scoffers, but his delight is on the law of the Lord. And on his law he meditates day and night. He's like a tree planted by streams of water that yields its fruit in its season, and its leaf does not wither, and all that he does, he prospers. Let's pray. Lord, we so desperately want to be like this tree. And we admit there are competing desires from the world to follow after the ways of the world instead of the ways of your word. And so mostly we hope that this meeting helps us just be encouraged to follow after you, whatever that may look like in each life here. But we pray as you're the creator of all things, you bring order out of chaos, you fill up what you construct, that we just be doing the same kinds of things you're doing. And we're thankful for the many gifts who've allowed us to arrive at this point over the years and even today. We ask for your blessing on our time together in this hour. In Jesus' name, amen. So I want to really just do two things. First of all, give a few minutes to Matt and Mark to kind of give you some information about this semester and sort of where we are. And then the bulk of the meeting I'll run, and it'll be about the building. So we're going to start with Matt.
Thank you, Paul. So it's good to be back here this afternoon. Just another plug for the Psalms reading plan, which we hope you've heard about multiple times by now. But these cards are out in the lobby. There's some on the information table. There's some underneath the TV, and there's some by the book table. Please do, when you get a chance this afternoon or this evening, to look at those Psalms resources that are there for you to look at. And all of those books are pretty easy to find online. If you need help finding any of them, please do let me know. My personal favorite, I'm going to give a plug for one of them because I think it's the one that looks the least attractive out there, but it's the tiny blue one. That is a collection of prayers put together from Scottish Presbyterians in like the late early 1600s. And what they did was for every psalm, they made like a paragraph-long prayer for the context of worship, like in a worship service. So if you ever read a psalm and you think, how in the world do I put this in my own language? That book really helped me do that. There's some these and thous in there. So if you can get through that, then it could be a great resource for you. And I believe that book is only $5 or $6 online. So do look through those when you get a chance. And I have some other announcements for adult discipleship. If you are looking for a community group or you know someone that's interested in joining a community group, there will be an interest meeting for a new group 2 Sundays from now, Sunday the 21st. It'll be immediately after the second service. We'll provide lunch, and we plan on providing some child care as well for young children. It's a non-committal meeting, so by showing up, you're not committing to anything. You're just hearing about at least one potential new group that we're starting. If there are enough, we may even start 2, depending on what that looks like. So that'll be January 21st, immediately after the second service. Discipleship training, which is our adult Sunday school, starts back next week, and I'm personally very excited about this. The class that we are offering is based on this book, Habits of Grace by David Mathis. If you've never read this book, it's all about what some refer to as the spiritual disciplines, things like Bible reading, prayer. There's even some things about, I believe, maybe some things on fasting and even worshiping together in a corporate body as well. Carl Ingvey and myself will be the main teachers of that class, and then Claude Owens and Trevor Molenhoff are filling in on some days where we need them to fill in as well. We are offering that class during the 9 a.m. and during the 10:45 slot. So if there's a morning that I'm teaching the 10:45, then Carl is going to teach the other, and we'll flip-flop that way. So if you're an adult, we encourage you to come check that class out. We do have about 20 copies of this book that we'll sell for $10, and then when those run out, or if you just want to get yours online ahead of time, you can find it online as well. But that starts next Sunday during the Sunday school time slots. Equipping nights are also making a return. If you're not familiar with those, that's a once-a-month Wednesday night meeting. where there is youth group going on. There is a children's program going on that I'll talk about as well. But for the adults, it's a time where we get to discuss a topic. Sometimes it's a topic that might be difficult to cover in a single sermon. It could be something controversial that's happening in the culture, or something in-depth theologically that requires an extended discussion. So the dates for those are January 24th, February 28th, March 20th, and May 1st. Those last from 6:30 to 7:30 in the evening. So again, the first one is here in a few weeks, January 24th. Looking forward to that. If you have any questions on adult discipleship, anything that I just said, you can find me after the meeting, and I'd be happy to fill you in. I also have some announcements on behalf of the children's ministry, since Sharon is not currently in town. Sunday school for pre-K through 5th grade also starts back January 14th. That's next week. She wanted me to recognize all of our Sunday school teachers in some way, and rather than fitting them on a slide, I said, what if we just ask them to stand up? So if you're a children's Sunday school teacher, pre-K through 5th grade, could you just stand up? Sharon really wanted y'all to be recognized. Thank you so much for what you do in the lives of our kids. And then also, Kids on Mission. Kids on Mission is what happens during the equipping nights on those Wednesdays. It's a once-a-month children's program that's from ages 4 years old through 5th grade. They meet during that time. Their lessons during that time are about missions that we support as a church. And then on some other time other than that night, about once a month, they'll have a service project that's somehow connected to that lesson as well. So if you want more information on Kids on Mission, you could contact Sharon, or also Beth Hikes and Tara Hackney, I believe, really lead that up. Our spring communicants class will start on Sunday, March 17th. So that's children that they might be sensing that they're ready to profess a faith of their own, and that they're ready to take the Lord's Supper. If you think that might be your kid, this would be a great class for them to attend. Sunday, March 17th. If you have questions about that, contact Sharon. And if you're a mom of young children, or you know of a mom with young children, there are 2 MOLO groups. MOLO stands for Mothers of Little Ones. There are 2 groups that you can attend. There's a morning group that meets twice a month on Tuesday mornings, and that starts this week, this upcoming Tuesday. And then there's an evening group that meets once a month on a Tuesday night as well. So that's 2 different opportunities for mothers of young children. And then lastly, YCM, that's our young children's ministry. They need more volunteers. Please do email Beth if you are Beth Hikes if you are interested or have questions. And from what I hear, they're offering a pretty sweet deal. She told me, you only serve 4 times a year, and you get to pick when you serve. That sounds like a great deal. So if you have questions about that, contact her. And if there's any questions about anything I announced tonight, you can just find me after the meeting. And that's it for my announcements. So I'll now hand it over to Mark.
Good evening. Do I need to do something with the slide here? Good evening. I'm Mark DeCosmaker. I'm the executive pastor. One of the thing I'm going to talk to you about tonight is essentially last year's budget and this year's budget. But I'd like to preface that by the fact that we are super blessed by having a pastor who is so conscious of the finances of church. He's super conservative. And one of the things he instills on all the staff is when we start a budget year, he sits us down and he says, look, when you come to Mark and you start to ask what you need for your ministry, he says, I want you to ask for what you need, but I want you to think about it as if you were going to talk to the person sitting to you right next to you in church and saying, I need this much money to do this work for God. So they really see what you give in faithfulness for us to do ministry is something that they have to shepherd and care for. Last year, our budget was $1,425,000, and we were so blessed by your faithfulness. giving came in at approximately 1.5 million. Expenses were slightly below what they had been predicted to be. So at this point, we're projecting a surplus of somewhere between $80,000 and $120,000, which we won't know the exact amount until the year ends up. And much of that surplus will go into the discretion of the session, which will then probably put it to the project that Paul is going to talk to you about. This year's budget is based on $1.5 million. So essentially, the budget is based on giving not having to increase in order to support the budget. Once again, this is a function of the fact that Paul really likes us to be conservative and to be able to base our entire budget based on what we think comes in and not having to borrow or use other funds that we have. Now, the pie graph that you're seeing above my head shows you a couple of really interesting things, which I think is wonderful. One of the things, although the numbers may not be easy for you to read, is we come in at about 40%, 46% of all of our monies is spent on staffing and payroll. And generally, the notion is that if you stay below about 55 to 58%, you are right in the sweet spot. So we actually are conservative there. And if you look at the section which is in yellow, which says ministry, and then the section in blue, which is essentially evangelism and outreach, which is missions, and El Cuerpo, which we think is local evangelism and local missions, our church puts 40% of all the money in the budget to outreach and ministry. So we're just so grateful to you. If you have any questions, we're a very transparent church. We're happy to open the full budget to anybody to see it. So thank you so much.
I don't know if it's a blessing to be with somebody who doesn't like to spend money. I guess there's certain advantages of it until you want to spend money, and then it's not so advantageous. All right, so the goal of the next few minutes is to try to anticipate and answer your questions. And invariably, we won't be able to answer all of them, but then we'll have a Q&A at the end. So if there's something that seems unclear, just make a note of that, and when we get to the end, you'll have a chance to ask your question, and hopefully we can give you an answer. And we're going to do it by trying to answer these questions. One is, who are we, which is really a vision question. What's the vision of Christ Community Church? Second is, where are we? Like, what's happening, and why are we here? What's the problem we're trying to solve? What's the urgency? And then third, what's the solution? And then finally, what are we going to ask you to be thinking about? So that's where we're going to head here. First of all, when I think about who are we, and we're trying to answer a question about vision, I would say that our vision is the same as it's been when we got started. We don't have some new bold vision in some sense. Our vision is to teach people about Jesus by helping them understand the Bible. That's our vision. That's how Christ Community Church got started. That's why it had any hope of getting legs with it, because we didn't have anything else, but we had the one thing people really wanted. And the people that came at the very beginning are still the people who come now. They say, what I really want to do is I want to come to church, I want to open my Bible, I want the pastor to read from the Bible and just do his best, like Matt did today, to say, here's how you should be thinking about it, and this is how you apply it. So we want that to be our vision for all times. We think that lives are transformed when they have a genuine encounter with Jesus, both from the Bible and from the community that they're in. So that's what we're trying to do here, and we're not really trying to change that. In Romans 10:17, it says, faith comes from hearing, and hearing through the word of Christ. And most of us know this passage from Hebrews. For the word of God is living and active, sharper than any two-edged sword, piercing to the division of the soul and the spirit, joints and marrow, discerning the thoughts and intentions of man. So we really believe there's a power in God's word. And probably most of you don't know this, but this logo that we created some years ago, this sort of encapsulates what we're doing. This is actually a passage, as you can see, from 2 Timothy. And we particularly chose 2 Timothy 4 because it would preach the word in season and out of season. You remember that passage? There'll come a time when people will have itching ears, remember that? And they'll hire people to tell them whatever they want to hear. And Paul is exhorting Timothy, hey, you just preach the word. You allow the word to do the work. And so that's how we have Christ at the center, and we believe he's exalted and known by knowing his word. And I think it's helpful, again, I'm a picture person and a story person, so when I think about what we're trying to do here, you've seen me use this picture many times. This is beloved Furman University, which you should know by now. A wonderful university where only the smartest and brightest go. It's where I met my wife. And in 1950-something, they were in downtown Greenville, and they moved sort of outside of Greenville to have a more campus space. And this was one of their first classroom buildings. And I was at the university, and there was an older gentleman, and I was looking at this black and white picture. He said, my dad planted those trees. And I was like, wow, that is so crazy. He said, yeah, when I was like 8 years old, I'd run around, in that big dirt pile where they planted the trees. And this is what it was like on the right when I was at Furman, which was maybe 50 years later. And so this picture somehow has just captured my attention, that what we're going to be about is the picture on the black and white. Very few of us are going to be around for the color picture, I hate to say. You're going to have a heavenly colorful picture, let's say that. But our goal here is we're not talking about something tonight that is for tomorrow. It's for 100 years from now. It's for 200 years from now. Yes, it's going to start happening this year, but we're just not thinking about, hey, here's our vision is just to this point. It's really for a future. Let me give you another picture that's totally self-serving. In case you don't know, this is my daughter, Morgan, who's on the front row. She's 33 weeks pregnant. And in that little black and white, that's her husband, by the way, Will. In the little black and white is Summer Lawless Kiesler. So sometime in February, she'll enter into the world. And I was thinking about Summer Lawless. It's pretty likely that people born here and they stay in this general area and they have their own kids. And I was hoping that when Summer Lawless had a great-granddaughter, somebody I'll never meet, but maybe she will, that great-granddaughter is going to need a place to go to meet Jesus. And of course, I hope she does it in her family, but she's going to need a church community. She's going to be able to go somewhere and say, hey, they open up the Bible. They do their best to tell me what they think God says about the Bible and how to apply it to my life. And so 100 years from now, I'll have a great, some number of great-granddaughters or grandson that I want to come here. I want them to come here. I want them to be like the Furman picture on the right. I want them to be able to say, like Matt told us this morning, the leaf doesn't wither. So when people who are tired or burned out or hungry or need shade or comfort, there'll be a place for them to go. So that's my hope. One more picture just as an illustration. This is First Presbyterian in Columbia, South Carolina, the church that Matt served at just a few months ago. And when I was talking to Matt during the interview process, he was saying their church was going through their own sort of Founders Day. And it was year 225 for the church. Imagine that. I mean, we're going to do 23 this year. And he said, yeah, we're having this big celebration because it's 225. When it started, George Washington was president. Can you imagine that? But this church is a very faithful church, 225 years later. And that's my hope for Christ Community Church. That the vision is just continuing to tell God's story over and over to a new generation. Now, there'll be things that happen, like there have been here at Christ Community Church, that cause us to to build something or do something maybe that's different, but it's all for the purposes of telling people about Jesus. That's really why we're here. So I don't want us to ever lose that point. The second thing is I want to see is in terms of our vision is that we really care about souls in Wilmington. So we're Christ Community Church. We're part of this community. Doesn't mean we don't care about the world or care about the Great Commission, but we're not here to change the world. That's really not our goal. The local church is going to change the world all over the planet. Our goal is to be a part of the ecosystem right here in Wilmington. And so that's what we're planted in a particular time. We've been given this particular space. Our culture is unique. Wilmington is unique, and we're called to be here and to touch people's lives. And we see ourselves as a kind of ballast in the city. You know, as the city runs after the ways of the world, it needs a place to go to say, well, what's the alternative? I mean, once I've run down that road and all my leaves have fallen off, where do I go? And so we want that to be Christ Community Church. Some of you know the passage from Jeremiah 29. He's exhorting the people of Israel who have been shipped off to Babylon, basically. And he says, seek the welfare of that city. See, they were kind of closed in, and they were around enemies, and they just didn't want to have anything to do with the enemies. So they ended up sort of drawing a wall around themselves. And Jeremiah the prophet has to come and says, no, you need to seek the welfare of the city that you're in. The city that I sent you to, the Lord says. And pray to the Lord on the city's behalf. Listen to what he says. For in its welfare, you will find your own welfare. So if we stay in a little huddle, which I know you don't think we are, our welfare will plummet if the city's welfare plummets. And maybe the city's welfare in terms of finances might be good, but if it's morally plummeting, it's going to hurt all of us. So we're called to be a church in Wilmington. We're called to be salt and light in Wilmington. And of course, we're going to support missions, but we're primarily thinking about the people in Wilmington, North Carolina. When Nancy and I moved here several years ago, 1989, you know, we moved here thinking, well, we'll like Wilmington. Who knows how long we'll be here? And about 5 years later, we're like, we're never leaving Wilmington. And we just love Wilmington. So I don't have a vision of trying to blow something up or be all over the state or all over the world. That's just not my vision. That's somebody else's vision. I'm not saying that's a bad one. It's just not mine. And we're really concerned about the people who live in the apartments that are mostly single and lonely. And you think about then the next set of apartments, and then if you go around the corner, the next set of apartments. And the people at River Lights, a lot of them are elderly. They come, their spouse has passed away. College students, beautiful little college girl here today, sat next to Laura. First time she'd ever come to Christ Community. She found us online, had the right wording, I guess, whatever she was. She's 20 years old. She comes all by herself. That, you know, I don't even remember her name, but I loved her right at that moment. Because I thought, she's hungry for something, and something about what she saw was like, this is something like what I need. And she comes and she gets connected to a person, and then she hears about God's Word. That's really what we're trying to do here. It's not complicated. It can be hard to do. It can actually be hard to hold on to, but it is something that we're trying to do. So that's where we are. There's a Ray Ortlund quote that Sam Kennedy used several weeks ago when he preached here. He said, nothing is more important to the state of the world than the state of the church. Man, that landed and didn't go away from me. Because so much, especially in 2024, we're all going to have a hard time holding our tongue in 2024, are we not? Because it feels like so much is riding on it. And I'm not trying to say a lot isn't riding on it. But man, it's already spun up of like this is the fork in the road for the country forever. And I think you can buy into that narrative, which isn't true. The truer narrative is the health of the church dictates the forward progress of a nation. And so that's what we're trying to do. We're trying to be as healthy as we can, not for our own purposes, but for the health of the community and our city. So we're here to teach God's word. We're here to touch lives. We're here to have people have a transforming encounter. And there's still so much left that we can do in the city that we don't think in any way we've kind of come to the end of it. It may be helpful just for you to see this is our land. So the line around the edges there, it's about 8 acres. We don't have to put a little retaining pond on it because we've put it down there behind that apartments. So you can see in terms of what we use, we're really a pretty small footprint on this 8 acres. And there's a lot more that can be done. And, some of it will be done while I'm here and some of it will be done when I'm gone. But I just wanted you to get a sense of the size of what we use. And then maybe that'll help you as we think about the building. And I'll come back to this slide if it's helpful for you. So that's the land. We feel like God's given us this great piece of land. And over time, we want to be a good steward of it. We don't want to hoard it. And we don't want to just expend it in a way that would not be very thoughtful. But we're slowly just sort of using the land in a way that we think best serves the people around us. Second thing I want us to see in terms of where we are is our growth. So we felt like it was good to kind of go back to pre-COVID, sort of January 2019, where we were, because we felt like we were in a good spot, and then COVID hit, and it was really a couple of years of sort of wonky numbers and all that stuff, and then where we are today. So you can see the children's attendance, which is 0 to 5th grade, the adult attendance on Sunday mornings, and then the total of that plus a few other numbers like college students and others make the final bar graph. So when pre-COVID, if you walked upstairs on a Sunday morning and you went to Sunday school, so Craig Garrison, who's one of our teachers, he told me a couple weeks ago, he said, Paul, if anybody has any questions about needing space in the Sunday school area, just send them to me, because I can convince them. And but 4 years ago, we might have had 25 kids up there. And it wouldn't be unusual for us to have over 50 kids up there now. That's quite a bit of difference in that regard. When we had a Sunday morning service, we might have had 330. Now we have 456. So today was 491. So that just gives you a sense of where we were, where we are, and then the totals are helpful to you as well. So just in terms of growing, so the next thing I wanted you to see, just trying to help you see where we are. In January of 2019, this was our Big El Cuerpo team. Liz Cooper was a part-time, still is a part-time person, doing a great job and coming out of the whole Florence thing, which was huge for us. And it really started growing at that point. Sharon was doing tutoring that was, at that point, Lizzie, wasn't it just once a week? And the whole budget, including Liz's salary and everything, was $25,000. Today, this is El Cuerpo. See, that's a pretty big difference. That's bigger than most parachurches ministries in town. I mean, if you went to FCA or Cru or Young Life, they probably don't have a $400,000 budget with 100 volunteers and this many staff. So now that's Christ Community. And I'm over that. Joy. But do you see how it's grown? So we have Zakoro, who's now moved into a full-time position. I think you have heard, if you didn't, I'm telling you now, the Community Foundation, the foundation that was established from the sale of the hospital, the $1 billion foundation, Lizzie submitted a proposal, and we got $200,000 this year. We just got the money this week. And we're part of a strategic funding where they think they're going to continue to give us that amount for the next few years. It's not a promise, but the reason you're a strategic is you're doing something strategic, and we assume you're going to need this kind of help over and over. So we think for the next 2 or 3 or maybe longer, we're going to get this same amount or maybe even more over time. So that has really expanded what we've done. For our Advent offering, we got $22,000, which is great. And that money sort of comes to El Cuerpo, is going to end up in the building. But you can just see how just doing El Cuerpo 4 years ago to today, this is a whole ministry. This is bigger than many churches in town in terms of budget and number of people that serve. Finally, this is a typical monthly calendar at Christ Community Church. And these are all things that happen at the church that aren't just regular business. This is just ministry every day. Because sometimes people say, well, I'm sure you're busy on Sunday, but what's it like the rest of the week? And we say, it's busy every day. I mean, if you've ever had a meeting here at night, you're not the only one in the building. It's 2 or 3. So we feel like we've been good stewards of the building, and there's not a lot of ways to expand in terms of more rooms or something with what we've got, because we've got so many things going on. So that's where we are in terms of growing. One last stat that's not on a slide. Pre-COVID, we had 7 full-time staff people and 4 part-time. So that was 11, and today we have 21. So when we hire the 2 people that we got the $200,000 for El Cuerpo, that'll put us at 11 full-time, and then we have 10 part-time. So again, just over the last 4 years, we've nearly doubled in that area. We've nearly doubled in a lot of areas. So trying to answer the question, who we are, we're still doing the same thing. Where are we? Or what's our problem or what's our urgency? I'm trying to help you see it in a stat way. And if you're good at leadership, you think of it in this way. When you're trying to lead people, in the simplest way, you're here. And as a leader, you're trying to lead people to there. Right? This is very simple. Many of you have done this. And as a leader, you're trying to get your people from here to there. And what happens a lot of times is that the leader will just focus on the vision. This is where we're going to go. We're going to get there. We're going to get there. But the best thing to do is to convince the people, this is all of you right now, we can't stay here. So now that I hopefully, with my many charts and stories, have convinced you we can't stay here, we've got to go somewhere. Something has to happen because we can't keep growing at the same pace and stay with the same facilities. So I want to shift from thinking about we can't stay here to where should we go. Now, we've talked about this many times, specifically as elders and deacons, staff. And here are some options that might come up in your mind and have come up in our mind. Well, let's use Wilshire in a more effective way. Maybe that can relieve some pressure. And it seems like it would, but it doesn't. One, it's rented out to another church that we rent it to. We do have some meetings over there, but a lot of the things that we do are pressure points right here, let's say like the clinic or Sunday morning, and we can't just transfer that over there. It just doesn't work in that same kind of way. So just moving ministry to Wilshire isn't something that really alleviates a lot of pressure. Second, we could say, well, let's plant a church. And honestly, a couple of years ago, we put out a survey and just had some questions from people, and plant a church was one of the boxes you could check. Nobody checked that box. I mean, and when I say nobody, not one person. And I'm not trying to say it's good or bad, but I think people love what they've got going on here, and they just don't want to be a part of the crew that goes out and tries to start it again. That's hard. That's hard, heavy lifting. So at least today, there's not enough energy to say, let's go do that today. Third, we could put modular units in the field. So I don't need to explain how unpopular that would be. But honestly, you look at it and say, we need 3 new classrooms. Let's put modular units out there. Honestly, by the time you build them and you get them in and you get them in all, it's not free. And it's not pretty at all. And so that's not something we've chased down. And then we're going to build a 2-story building that I'll talk about here. And you could make the price less. You could just make it a 1-story building. But the problem with the 1-story building, or I'd say that just the challenge, is once you build it, you can't take the roof off and build another story. It's just too complicated. So if you want to build for the future, you should just go ahead and do the 2-story now, because if you don't do that, it's going to be 1 story forever, and then you have to build another building. So that's how we've gotten to where we are. So what's the solution? How can we get from here to there? And that is this diagram and the diagrams that I'm going to show you. So I'm going to try to explain it the best I can, and if you're just sort of spatially handicapped in some way, I totally understand. But let's look at the new building, which we're calling Phase 1. And if you go down the hallway through the nurseries, the nursery door, there'll be a hallway that's enclosed. It's not open or anything. Into the next building, that will be a T on this building. Is everybody with me? So this little hallway that's pointing out here, that's next to the nurseries, and you're going to go through that, and it'll open up. And if you went all the way through towards the word building, you'd come out to the parking lot that's out here. Is everybody spatially oriented on that? It's just going to be a T right there. And basically on the left side, we're moving everything that's upstairs downstairs for a lot of good reasons for that. So Sharon's area, it's all coming downstairs. There's a couple of younger children's rooms in this area. And it's more or less set up the same way. In other words, there's a big meeting area and then classrooms around the side. Pretty decent sized lobby there, because we feel pretty certain that's going to feel a lot like a main entrance once you get there, since you drive there first. So there's enough room there, if you think about the chairs and couches out here, to put that in that area and still be able to walk around it. Restrooms, a kitchen will be there. 2 rooms for the clinic. So right now the doctors use the first and second, or 1-year-old and 2-year-old room. They'll be happy to get out of those. And they'll just be clinic rooms. And then the clinic will also use the gym area on the 2 times a month they meet as well. So that's downstairs. The gym is a little bit bigger than half a gym. So half a gym is 45 by 45, and there's 10 feet, past that. There'll be a couple of goals up there. It's primarily going to be used for multi-purpose. It's not primarily a gym. In other words, we're not putting some nice laminate floor down or anything like that. It's mostly going to be a kids area, a tutoring area, a spillover area in a bunch of ways. And then what I think is going to be fairly used heavily is this outdoor covered patio. Basically, if you think about where those picnic tables are right now. So the gym, if you think Windy Gap, Liz and Park, the gym's going to have a couple of garage doors that open rather than like a door like this, so that it feels like it's connected to the covered area. So it'll be a place, if it's raining, you could be, if you're in the youth group, or just be a comfortable place to be. Or if we have our Founders Day or Fall Festival, there'll be a flow from the inside to the outside rather than go through the side door by the kitchen. Does that make sense? So we're really trying to make that a nice area, really not just for ourselves. You won't be surprised how many people from our area walk through and use the playground, or run their dogs around, or just bring their family. And quite often they sit out here in a nice shaded area. So we're just going to provide that for ourselves, but also for the community. So that's the downstairs of Phase 1. Everybody got that? We'll come back if you have a question. This is the upstairs of it. You see the gym on the right, it's 2 stories, so there's no room over there on the right-hand side. The future growth, so now this connector is coming out of Sharon's area, if you're upstairs. And we just left that area kind of open because we needed some space to say, as things grow, there's some way to put a wall in or do something and have some room. And then the youth, middle school, high school is all going to be on the left-hand side. So we've basically just pushed all the youth stuff to that one building, upstairs and downstairs. Make sense? All right, now part of phase 2 is also restructuring the upstairs, current upstairs and downstairs of this building. All right, so we're going to go to that. This is the current downstairs. In case you don't know it, you're in the sanctuary. All right? The thing just to notice is that on the staff offices, we're taking up that whole space. So the nursery and the stairwell will all go away, all be offices. The 1-year-old room, which is right here, that if you sit in the corner on Sundays, you get to hear a lot in the 1-year-old room, will become an office sort of suite for El Cuerpo. And then the 2 connected rooms right down here will be 1-year-old and nursery. Make sense? So 2-year-old, 3-year-old, all going to the children's area where Sharon is. Everybody good on that? This is upstairs of the current building. If you go up the elevator, you see on the far right-hand side, we'll redo what the youth area is now into a couple of classrooms and a storage area. The classroom, the first classroom to your right next to the restrooms is the current adult or college ministry classroom. That's the size of that. And then when you go into the next phase, that's Sharon's old area that's been cut up into 5 classrooms, basically. And what we've decided, at least at this point, is if you go all the way to the end of the building, the meeting space will have sort of a little bit of a refrigerator and coffee, and it'll feel a little bit more like a lobby area up there. So if you're waiting on somebody, there'll just be a place for you to be up there. And then the classroom den is going to look like your den, because a lot of small groups meet here, and they don't really want the chairs in rows and a television. They want to be, around. And so that's going to just have furniture in it like it would be in your den. And then the other rooms will be classrooms that'll primarily be used for adult and college students, Sunday mornings, and then during the week we have ESL and other small groups, that sort of thing. So that's all phase 1. Everybody good so far? Because it gets complicated, I know, when you haven't seen these. Phase 2, we're not opposed to doing them together, and we'll get to that in a minute, is the expansion of the sanctuary and the lobby. And I think I've said this before to many of you, but basically moving this wall to the sidewalk. And then taking the wall that corresponds down here that would probably come to somewhere around that fire escape would be the new door. So the lobby would be extended. We would turn the sanctuary, obviously, from it being on the corner to now you would come in from the lobby through a center aisle. And currently this holds about 400, and that holds 625. And that's pretty much the vision maximum for Christ Community Church. Meaning, if we got in there and we could all meet together, that'd be great. If we needed to go to 2 services, that would be okay. But we don't really have a vision to grow past 800, 900, 1,000 maybe. We're not looking to do 3,000 or 4,000. Does that make sense? So I think if we got to a much bigger number, we would be talking about planting a church or something like that. Because we don't have a big desire to put a big box sanctuary on that field. 1, it's super expensive. 2, it's really a single-use item for a lot of money. And we use the field as much as any room in the building other than the sanctuary. So we'd have to replace the field in some form. So we feel like, in vision-wise, Christ Community Church stewardship of this size is that size of a sanctuary. So it's not, that's the next phase, and then as we grow, we'll do a 2,000 member sanctuary. That's not our goal. I think most of you feel like I can be seen here, I can be known here. That's important to me. It's hard to do it even with 500, but imagine 5,000. That's just, that needs to be in our ecosystem in Wilmington, but that's not the Paul Phillips ecosystem right now, and that's not what we really are trying to do. So that's phase 2 All right, so phase one is the new building and the restructure of the up and down stairs of this current building. If we raise enough money, which I'll get to in a moment, we'll take this wall out and the lobby wall out, and we'll do that project. All right, we all good on that? We'll come back to it, but how are we going to get to this point? And the big part is funding. So if you think about having 3 buckets that are going to get us to phase one, the church has $800,000 in a building fund that we're going to immediately transfer into the building project. That's mostly conservative Paul Phillips not liking to spend money, and now Paul Phillips does have to spend money, but I'm happy to spend it on this project. That doesn't include the $100,000 surplus that Mark talked about. So it's $800,000 for sure. It could be another $100,000, don't know. But we feel like that's a pretty good start. I mean, that's like a running start towards the goal. We have the property at Wilshire, and it's 4 acres. It has a building on it, and it could easily sell. Just a conservative guess is $1.5 to $2 million. We don't think it'd be hard to sell. We're not trying to sell it, like we can't wait to sell it, but we're happy to sell it in order to fund this next project. But we're not going to sell it until we get through the capital campaign, because then we'll know, well, what are we thinking about? And there's 2 ways to think about it. One is we would prefer that it stay a church rather than it just become apartments or a car wash. Or a storage unit. And so if we did that, it would probably be less, the price would be less than if we went to a commercial builder and he wanted to max out the property. So we would love to gift it in a way that would help another church stay there rather than try to get the maximum amount of money out of it. But you can see where there's some little wiggle room. And then if you talk to a capital campaign consultant, they basically tell you you can raise twice your annual budget in a 2-year campaign. So our annual budget is 1.5. 1.5 times 2, especially for a Furman grad, is not hard to calculate, is 3. And so $3 million from a capital campaign, 1.5 to 2 from Wilshire, and 800, that gets you pretty close to 5.5. So we're not opposed to taking out the debt, over time in order to get the whole thing done, because money will come in over the 2 years. But it'd be wonderful to get to the end of the project in 2 or 3 years and say, hey, that's paid off. So that would be a real goal. Now, to do phase 2 is $1.5 million. So could we do the 2 of them together? The answer is yes, but one of these 3 circles has to grow. Does that make sense? So either raise more money from the capital campaign, or we get more money from the property, or the church is able to give more money. Whatever that is, would have to get closer to 7. And we don't have a hard number on the threshold of debt that we would be willing to service, but I don't think it would be much more than $1 million. So we'd have to get that close. And I know for me personally, and I know the elders think this way too, I don't want to retire from Christ Community Church and there be debt. I just want a clear lane for the next person to run in. There'll be enough challenges to not have to worry about debt. So even if we took it on, it wouldn't be long before we tried to clear that off at some point. But we would love to get to the $7 million mark. Now, that's going to take some really big gifts. If we do them together, you probably save $100,000 to $200,000, because you've got all the equipment out here and all the contractors out here. If you say, hey, come back in 2 years, it's expensive to get them all to come back out. So there's a big benefit to trying to doing it together. But we're not committed to that if we don't raise enough money. Does that make sense? But we are committed to getting to the 5.5. All right, let me see. The timeline is we're going to have a capital campaign that's going to start April the 28th. It's going to last for 4 weeks. It's going to end at Founders Day. So you'll be hearing about capital campaign stuff from now until that point. And then there'll be a 4-week sort of sermon series and information and all that kind of stuff. You're getting a lot of it right now. But during that time, and then you'll be asked to give a pledge at the end of that time on Founders Day, May the 19th. Most of you have been involved with these things, probably even here. But I just want you to be thinking about that. And if we get enough money and all these things come together, which we believe that they will, but we need to say, Lord willing, we would break ground in the fall of 2024, and it takes about a year to do phase 1. So if you add phase 2 to it, it'd be a little bit longer, but that's sort of gives you sort of a parameter. So trying to get through the capital campaign season, start something in the fall of 24, hopefully in the fall of 25, have a finished building. All right, everybody good on that? All right, so what are we going to ask you to do right now? And that comes from the book of Nehemiah, one of my favorite books. Remember, Nehemiah heard that his city was in trouble, the walls were torn down, and the very first thing he did was to just pray. And so that's really today, that's just what we're asking you to do, is just pray. Lord, there's still lots of people to reach in Wilmington. We think this is the way to do it. But who knows? I mean, the Lord may have some plan. But just really genuinely be praying about it. And there'll be prompts. We'll have you a book card and a bookmark and different things for you to be praying through. But just to pray, and then when an opportunity is opened, like there was for Nehemiah, remember he went before the king, and the king made this great question, what are you requesting? And Nehemiah listed a bunch of things he was requesting, but here's the thing that really catches me about that. I need all these things so that you can send me. I want to rebuild it. See, Nehemiah wasn't like, I see a problem, and king, you should go take care of the problem. He said, if you would supply it, I'll go do it. So when I say prayer and participation, you pray and then think about how you would participate. Not how the church would do something or Paul would do something. Just say, God, I'm praying, and then I'm going to be personally asked, what are you requesting? And we're going to request that you consider giving. So this is going to be the biggest project many of us have ever given money to. It will be the biggest project I've ever given to. And so we're going to probably have to make some of the biggest gifts that we've ever made in order for make it to happen. That happened with this building. If you don't know the story, we had a $450,000 budget when we did a capital campaign for this building. And we had the consultants come in and they said, hey, you could raise about $1 million. And we said, that'd be wonderful, but we can't build it unless we get to 1.8. And they said, Paul, that would be wonderful, but you're not going to get to 1.8. So let's lower expectations. And I said, well, that's really all the debt we could afford was $1 million, so it had to get to 1.8. And we had the capital campaign, and we got to 1.82. It was, and I called the consultant, afterwards. He's like, you're not even on the bell curve. You're somewhere off the curve, And I'm not saying, history repeats itself, but this church has been a church that's committed to the Word of God. That's why I wanted to start with what we're trying to do. We're trying to do the same thing. And we're just trying to do it in a way that's more effective for the most amount of people. And we think this is the way that's going to happen. I'm going to ask Ned to come up and introduce his committee, and then we'll do a Q&A. Ned.
Hello. You get the award for coming out on a Sunday afternoon for a very important cause, but it's encouraging to see so many smiling and friendly faces. So let me introduce you to a few of them that are going to be involved in the capital campaign. Again, if I don't know you, I'm Ned Marable, and I have the privilege of leading the capital campaign. So Building faith, strengthening community. It was up there just a little bit ago. But I'd like to, and I hope most of these folks, if not all, are here. I know the first one is Chris Banker. Come up here and join me, Chris. Chris Banker will be the assistant director of the campaign, and super excited that we're going to be working so closely together. Kyle Myers. Yeah, come up front, Kyle. I want you all to see these people. These are the people you're praying for, so if nothing else. Kyle Myers has an incredibly important job. Everyone is, and I don't mean to emphasize one over another, but she is really talented and is going to communicate to the church what's going on with the capital campaign. And my hope is there may come a day where you say, gosh, too much information. We don't feel like that could be true today. We want to overload you with information if not anything else. But Kyle will be working on communicating the message to the church. Karen Davis, I know Karen's here. Karen is the administrative director of the capital campaign, and honestly, that's a catch-all. Like already, she's probably done things that I said weren't in the job description I provided for at first. But in the spirit of being a very good servant, she hadn't said no to me. So I'm very grateful for that. So Karen Davis. Claude Owens. You're going to have to help me there, Claude. Awesome. We've added someone to the committee, so that... I know. So, and Michael Craig. Okay, now Michael Craig. Claude Owens, we are going to have several events during the course of the capital campaign. Claude is the major events director, and my new friend Michael Craig is his assistant director. So I've met him at the same time many of you have, perhaps, but thank you so much for that. Sharon Radford, and I'm not waiting for her to come up. Max can come up in her stead. No, I'm just kidding. No one can imitate Sharon Radford, as I think you all know. But Sharon will, and we want to make sure, and we've done this in campaigns in the past, that we include our children for stewardship, for prayer, they're as much a part of this as we are. And she did a wonderful job with that last time. So we'll give her a pass in Orlando for right now. But the next position to fill is prayer or spiritual awareness, as we call it. And I'm actually looking to fill that position. So I'm not going to invite someone up to fill that role, but you'll hear more about that later. Brian Beecham. Brian has been at Christ Community Church for about a year. He had breakfast with Paul and said the key words, I was involved in a capital campaign before. So if any of you are thinking you may say those words, watch out where it may lead you. But Brian has willingly agreed to serve. At this point, we're still refining and defining that role, but I'm very, very excited that he's agreed to be a part of the team. And Mark Cosmaker, who probably serves on every committee in the church. So, but this is your capital campaign committee standing before you today. Not everyone, but most everyone. It's our pleasure to serve the church in this way. I was telling them the first time we met together, everybody may have a reason, and I'm sure it'll become more clear to them as we go. Why am I doing this? I'm doing this because I have seen God work in such a mighty way in this church. I'd like to get a front row seat for that. And again, many reasons, many others might say that, but that's mine. So thank you, Paul. Thanks, y'all.
Okay, now we're at the Q&A point. It could be on the building, it could be on any. But we're really trying to give you as much information and clarity because you'll spread out and have conversations with people. And I know it can be confusing. Well, which way is the building going to go and how much does it cost and which is phase 1 and phase 2? So we're really trying to make sure when you leave, even if you need to come up to me afterwards or somebody on the committee, that you go, I totally get it now. We don't want you to leave going, I know he did his best, but I didn't get it. So Let's make sure we get it. So what questions do you have or comments or thoughts? It's a good time to ask them. Yes.
The phase one and the refurbishment of the areas we have, the budget is currently set at 5.5 million. Is there a contingency built into that?
A contingency for
Construction costs, material costs, labor costs, increasing above that budget?
at this point, there isn't, and the reason there isn't is because we don't have the architectural design that the builder, who's going to be Greg Taylor, can get an exact number off of. That number is going to come probably around May, maybe earlier, and then we'll know exactly what that number is, and then Greg will be the person who say, hey, we need to put a contingency because of lumber or steel or something like that. Today, we don't have that number. This is sort of the closest number we have to what we think it's going to cost. But it's possible it could come back around. Thankfully, the prices aren't going up at the same rate they were. They're still pretty high, but and that could be a possibility, but we'll kind of all know that together when we arrive. It's a great question. Yeah.
Greg Taylor is the one who provided most of the cost?
Yes. Yep. What's that?
What's the question?
Oh, what did Greg Taylor provide? Yeah, he's done his best job of giving us the best guess he can. But most of you probably know in the last couple of years, you have a price on lumber, and then 3 days later, it's 1.5 times or something. It's been a really crazy piece of our time. Today, it's not quite as crazy as it was, but we feel relatively confident in the number. But again, before we pull the trigger on anything, we'll know the number, so we won't be caught off guard, hopefully. Great, yeah. That is a great question that I don't have an answer to. But Carly's writing that question down. That'd be my guess, is that we build all that, then move what we could, and then renovate, try to find the best times that would work. I mean, there's going to be some inconvenience, as you would know, on trying to help people get into their house. It'd be the same thing here if we blow this out. I can't exactly know what that would look like for a while. Yeah, a mess is good, but we'll try to figure that out as we go. Rick Myers, he needs to stand up. Rick is the person who's our liaison between the congregation and Greg. So we'd really rather you not go to Greg. I mean, he's the builder, although he would be very kind about receiving your question. But go to Rick, and then Rick will say, I either have the answer or I'll go find the answer in that way. And you'll have more questions as time goes along, but Rick is our sort of funnel for the congregation, myself included, and then he'll go to Greg, try to get an answer, and come back. So great. Yeah. Yes. Yeah, the question was, what are we going to do once the construction starts and how we meet? And again, the best guess, is this right, Greg? We'll probably build that, then move in, and then do the retrofit. Does that sound pretty normal? Yeah. Good. No, that's great. That's a great question. These are great questions. Yep. Great. The question is specifically about the kitchen, which it was a big question as we went through. We're not trying to build like an industrial grade kitchen like we would serve 500 meals out of. So we are keeping this kitchen, and the next kitchen will be similarly stocked. It'll have a washer and dryer in it. I think that'll be the most significant add-on to it, but it'll be similar in size and sort of similar in capacity. It'll have a pass-through into the gym, just like this does into the hallway, and there'll be an outside exit, much like this kitchen. There'll be an outside exit to it, and it'll be similar in size. Great question. Yes. Yeah, which one? Yeah, let's see if we can get it from here. Okay, so if you're looking at this picture and you go to the hallway on the left, that's the nursery. And right there, next to the nursery, will be a T building. And that's phase one right there. You'll come down the hallway. Again, you're not going to go outside. It'll be just an enclosed pass-through to a building. If you think about it, take the sanctuary off. If you think about that building and just turn it 90 degrees and stick it on the end so it looks like a T. That's phase one. Does that make sense? That's great. That's a great question. Yes. That's a great question. Thank you for asking that. Today, we're not planning on expanding the parking lot in a surfaced area. We've done some work back there. If you park back there, you probably noticed, to try to put more gravel and make it more user-friendly. When we get to another number, we'll have to do a parking lot. But today, we don't need it because one of the things that helped us with spacing out the service 15 more minutes is the turnover wasn't so tight. Some of you probably felt that tightness. Whoever's preaching goes too long, and then it's tough. And that guy just can't stop. I've tried to get him to stop, but he can't. But if you get everybody here at one time, it's tight. And so we're trying to make more use of the space back there just in the rock and gravel area because it's not free, but it's a lot cheaper. And I don't remember, Greg, you quoted me a number one time, like how much it cost to build a parking space. It was some high number. Yeah. Yeah, so, when we just said, hey, let's just pop up another $1 million for parking, we felt like, how about some more rocks, Yeah. I mean, that's going to be an eventuality, obviously, and especially if we got to a much higher number, we'd probably have to. And it would connect from the apartments. I mean, that's where the next parking lot's going to be, is connected to the apartments and sort of where the gravel is right now. Great question. Yes. Possible. It really is a hiring question, not a building question. And we have tried to hire a Hispanic male pastor, but man, it's a hard person to find that fits sort of in our DNA, because most of repeat the question. So the question was, have we thought about the facility, whether this one or the new one, being part of a place where Hispanics could meet and have a second service or have their own service. And most of the Hispanic community typically is Catholic or sort of prosperity gospel. So it's very hard to find somebody in our lane. And we're looking for it. And then once that happens, I think the question would be, what's the best way to service those people? And it might be a service. It might not. See, the problem is, you probably know, just their kids want to be in the English-speaking service, but then they want to be in the Spanish one, and so. But we're willing to take that on, but we got to find a person first. That's a lot harder than how they would use the building. Great question. Yep.
Phase two is going to go how close to the sidewalk?
I don't know.
And the question really is, if you go real close to the sidewalk, will you get approval for that?
Yes, we would get approval. I'm sorry. Thank you. How'd you like to be married to me? Now you're like, oh my gosh. Holy smokes. But you're going to pray for Nancy like crazy now. So how close to the sidewalk? It'd be pretty close. Now on the grade, it's hard to say here, but like if we would go straight out, obviously, from this floor, so you wouldn't see people walking by and their heads would be in these windows because they'd be too far down. But we won't have a problem getting it to the place that we want it. I mean, it does have to be approved by the city, but we're not anticipating that being a problem. Was there another question you had in that? Once you get the city involved, there's all kinds of things that can go sideways, but those aren't things we control. But we've put it out in a way that we think it could be okay. It'll be approved. These are great questions. It's a good time to ask one. Yes. Yes, I think it would fit with what we have currently. It wouldn't be something different. I mean, right. It's not going to be the black box. I'm sorry, Emily. With the strobe lights, and then I come out with a fog machine. That is dream right there, baby. Entry music for Pastor Paul. That'll be my last sermon. I mean, this is what I really wanted every time. Yes. It's definitely possible. Oh, sorry. Would we go back to one service? That would be preferable. There's some questions by the time you get there about that and how you get used to coming at a certain time and all that stuff. But I would love it if we could stay at one service for a while. I think there's a benefit to that, but we'll see. We'll all know together. In other words, we'll all see it growing together and say, wow, that's going to be complicated. One of the things that most people feel, and you may feel the same, is if we just do phase 1 and don't do phase 2, once that's done and people are using it, you're going to immediately get pressure here. So even though you may say it's tight, going to 3 services is definitely not preferable. So if you could get them together, that'd be, getting the 2 things together rather than 12 months later we're saying, well, let's do another capital campaign for, $1.5 million. That'd be hard.
That was my next what-if question. How much debt would we be willing to take to do phase 1 and phase 2?
Yeah.
We don't get the money we want to start out.
Yeah, I mean, we have to.
Because there is a big additional cost if you don't do it.
Right. The question is. Is how much debt would the church be willing to service in either side, and I would just say as a ballpark $1 million. I mean, it'll be something the elders decide on, and where the interest rate is, and is it a balloon or is it 10 years? There's all kinds of factors on that, but that's sort of a number. The challenge is that we don't want to cut staff in order to do it. So it has to fit inside our budget, and we think that it could about $1 million, but probably not much different than that. Just to say, if we got to like 625, let's say, or 6.25, would we go ahead and do phase 2? I think the answer would be yes, we would do that. If we got to 4.25, probably not. Great question. Okay, you feel clear? Because a lot, just we're trying to get people to walk out saying, I got it, I got it. I can tell somebody else, and they're not going to get confused. But, yes. Greg said it typically is in a sort of a year time frame. So just if we put the shovel in the dirt. This is a good question, Mike. What's going to happen in terms of the actual move-in date? We think what's going to happen is on May 19th, or let's just say June 1st, we'll have all the information, all the cards turned up. How much is it really going to cost? How much did we really get? How much could we really get for Wilshire? I mean, we could guess right now, but when we get to June 1st, we'll look at all the cards face up and we'll say, okay, what do we want to do? And then let's just say we're going to build phase 1. Then we would tell Greg, we're ready to go on June 1st. And then he would just tell us, I'm ready to go on July 15th or some date. And that would be the first day. And then when that day happens, if it's just phase 1, it's about a year. Does that make sense? If we add phase 2 to it, it'll be a little bit longer. Good, another good question. Yes, yeah. I don't know, but when we talked about this a long time ago, what would we do if we do phase 2 and blow out this wall? Okay, my daughter and my wife are laughing at me now. Pretty soon I'm gonna have my granddaughter laughing at me. What we would do when we blow out this wall, and you don't need to go ask Greg this, but when we talked about it 3 or 4 years ago, when we talked about this idea, he said for a long time you could meet in here and we could build, and then there would be a period of time that wouldn't be like 3 months, but it might be a month where you say, hey, we got to tear down this wall and that wall and connect them. And so something would have to happen in that time, but it wouldn't be like that gets blown out and we're gone for 6 months or something. It would be built, and then we would just like take down the curtain, and it would be a few weeks of putting it together. That's going to be a little adventure for all of us at that point, but it'll be exciting to be on. It's better than meeting in a gym, which I've done, so many of you have as well. These are great questions. Again, every couple of weeks there'll be some piece of information that will come out that'll just be an encouraging, inspirational story or something about the building and a little update. And you'll just sort of get them every couple of weeks. And if you want to ask Rick, or you want to ask a staff person, you want to ask an elder, you want to ask one of the committee people, they're all in on the inside. They can answer most of your questions or get an answer. And then when we get to April 28th, it'll be, sort of a typical campaign. There's a series of messages and a date where you give a pledge card and that sort of thing. And it'll be a 2-year pledge time frame. So if you're going to give $100,000, you might say, I'm going to give $50,000 a year. If you're going to give $10,000, you could give it all at once, of course, but you might give it $5,000 a year. Yeah.
Has the Wilshire congregation been apprised of our plans so that they can start a capital campaign if they would like that building?
Mark, do you know the answer to that question? I'm sorry. Let me say the question because Mark was going to forget that. I'll cover for you, Mark. Has the Wilshire Hope, right? Christ Our Hope meets there, and Mark's sort of our go-between. And what do they think about where we are and where they are?
So I met with their pastor several months ago and let him know where we were. And they have expressed an interest from almost the beginning that if the building would become available, that they would have an opportunity to purchase the building. So it's actually in our lease with them. So they are aware, and they will be kept apprised, but we haven't finalized anything because we don't know until all the cards are up. But they are aware of where we're at in the process, and that it would be our desire, as Paul said, that if we could keep the building in service as a church, that is, we think, our preference.
Great. They have the first right of refusal, so when we put a price tag on it, if they want it, they would get it. It wouldn't go anywhere else. But if they said, hey, we can't do it for whatever reason, then it would go out on the market.
I do know that a lot of people would like to have that property.
Yes.
Keep getting letters every day.
Yeah.
Trinity Church, we'd like to do this.
Yeah, there's quite a few churches and other people and I've gotten quite a few phone calls myself about it. So that's the great thing, is that we don't think it'll be hard to sell, whether we do it now or in 6 months. We're not thinking we're going to hold on to it for a year trying to find a buyer. Yes.
Zach Phillips says your son is laughing too.
Oh. Okay, we're going to just end it right there. That is a good place to end it. Zach Phillips and Morgan Kiesler now written out of the will. So I'm looking for people to put in it if you want to be kind to me. Let's pray together. Lord, thank you so much just for the spirit of unity here. We know that comes from you. And again, we are open to your movement. And we know we don't have great eyes to see. Our own desires get in the way of that and cloud our thinking, but you're gracious enough to bring lots of good minds into this discussion between the staff and the elders and the deacons and the committee, that we've all got agreement. So we just pray that you would be our leader and help us think wisely about it, and most particularly how we're going to participate in it. I pray in Jesus' name. Amen. Well, we'll be around for a little while. If you want to ask us questions, we'll be happy to answer those.